My name is Thabile. I am joined today by Thabile Nkunjana, who is an agricultural economist who is specific field is agriculture and trade. And today, Thabile will be taking us through his opinions on the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement and how it will influence the agricultural economy for South Africa, particularly on export basis. Thabile, welcome.
Welcome to you, Zavaya. Thanks for having me, my guy. I appreciate being part of this podcast. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm equally looking forward to it. So let's get straight into it. So the AfCFTA, which I'm going to refer going forward as the agreement, if you are fine with that, because it's quite a mouthful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how will it enhance market access for the South African agricultural products within the African continent?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that has been coming for some time. I mean, if you are to recall when it all started, it started back in I think 2012, if I'm not mistaken, when the heads of states from Africa met. So I think it was somewhere in East Africa, where they were engaging on issues that are affecting Africa as a whole. And so then the talks around the Africa free continental trade area then started, to take time, sort of to take shape. And then as a result, we officially signed it. It was officially signed in Kigali in 2019. And it became, one of the larger, kind of trade agreements that are there in the world, if you had to look the people, so therefore, in a broad or in a nutshell, the Africa Free Trade, the AfCFTA, as I refer to it, is one of the largest, in terms of size. And therefore, any country that is within the continent, especially a country like South Africa, that is export orientated, it is definitely going to benefit to this because, amongst some of the issues that the agreement is going to do, is going to sort of look into the tariffs, which is some of the issues that are, kind of impinging other countries to benefit fully into it. And of course, it is an inclusive kind of approach, in terms of developing other countries, like, those that are normally not necessarily as exporting as South Africa, or maybe, countries like Kenya and, so forth. So it is quite an opportunity for South Africa and generally for the other, African countries to be able to be part of it.
Yeah, so thank you very much. You raise an important matter there when it comes to the population. I think is the biggest when it comes to the population covered. So are there any lessons that we can draw from previous trade agreements, maybe the ones that have been signed of that more or less same magnitude from either Europe, America, South America?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I mean, look at this in the context of being a country that is like South Africa, and also you are exporting largely to producing your products largely to export. I mean, for instance, now we are exporting around half of what we produce, in terms of our products, and this, of course, also in value terms. So, and this has begun since we've signed, our agreements that were signed after 1994. And of course, Europe, as you mentioned, one of the key markets for South African agricultural exports, it has grown significantly. I mean, we're talking billions of products that are sent there. South Africa at this stage is exporting, at least as of last year, we had a new record of 13.2 billion. That's quite, if you convert that to rands, it's over 200 billion only for agricultural products. So it is, it's one of those issues that I would say, the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement is definitely going to be a very beneficial one, given that South Africa already has a very good footing, within the continent, and also the continent is also the biggest, market for South Africa. If you look into across all the agricultural products, so therefore there are good prospects in it, but of course, there are going to be issues that are need to be addressed, to make this, dream or goal to be a reality in terms of putting proper infrastructures and so forth. But I can tell you that it is going to be a good one. And the good thing is that for now, we have begun to see trade within it. So as much as it started slowly, but I think now we are getting into, a very progressive stage. And that's something that we should be all Africans be proud of and excited to look forward to.
No, very insightful. So what happens with trade agreements? We're talking about the benefits that South Africa will get from this agreement. But with agreements, we do know that there's also competition that comes with it. So how will the South Africa's agriculture sector compete with other African countries in terms of production and exports?
So I mean, for South Africa, we have been as a country, we have been into the trading, space for 8 years now, at least after the apartheid regime was kind of cancelled. So that gives the country an experience of 30 years, and that means then it has developed to be one of the countries. For instance, even if you were to look into the issues of, generally the infrastructure and all that, they have been developed specifically to support, the country to that. So therefore, the infrastructure that we have, for instance, and the experience that the country has acquired throughout these years of trading at the global stage, it is definitely something that is going to assist South Africa, to be a country that is definitely going to be competitive. And also given that, I mean, we have quite a good, production, techniques. I mean, if you were to look where there are products South Africa that is largely a larger export in the world, and therefore, if we were to compare those to a scale of an Africa, then it means then even for those that were not necessarily the biggest in the world, but within the continent, we are definitely going to be at an advantage based on the experience that we have, the infrastructure that has been developed, even though there has been issues here and there. But I think that those are some of the things that are kind of giving South Africa a competitive edge to some other countries. But of course, as I said, that this is something that even other countries are going to benefit on. Competition, if there's anything about competition, it creates efficiency. And then once countries are able to compete at that, they can easily get into the world market, which Africa really needs to get into. So the Africa Free Trade area, I think that is going to also enhance that at a larger scale, not necessarily for South Africa, but also for other African countries that are exporting to the world.
Thanks for that. You do raise a very important point regarding the competitive advantage that South Africa has. Are there any products or certain sectors within the South African agriculture export market that we should keep an eye on, where we have a very good competitive advantage?
So I mean, yeah, there's a lot. I'm not gonna lie to you. There are a lot of products that South Africa has, quite a good competitive advantage in terms of production. For instance, I mean, if we are to look into, I'm gonna take maize, which is currently a very topical issue at this stage because of the drought and whatnot. So South Africa produces around 70% of maize within the region. That is the region that we are in Africa, and export around 80% of that. And part of that has been because then the country has developed quite a number of varieties that are, technologically sort of GMOs, one would say, that have been engineered to adapt to the current climate issues that we are having. Look, recently, East African countries are going through flooding and stuff, but the rest of the bottom part of the continent is facing some severe drought. So this tells you, the climate issues that countries need to adapt to. So for South Africa, these are some of the issues that we have, as a country, managed to sort of address by developing varieties, both in fruit, for instance, even apples and pears. We're developing varieties that are resistant to issues related to climate. These are effects, right? So if you have to take maize and fruit in generally, South Africa has quite a good comparative advantage compared to these other countries because of such, issues. Because, for instance, even if you have to look into yields, by yields, I mean, you take a hectare in South Africa for maize, and then you take another hectare in other African countries based on the on the varieties or the seeds that they have. You find that South African farmers, they get way more compared to those countries, and this is because of the technology that I was talking about. So therefore there's a kind of the factors that kind of make South Africa to be at a better competitive end of things when we are bringing such issues. But there can be a number of them. It's a list, but I think for now those are the ones that I can just put on top of my head at this stage.
So mostly when we talk about the benefits of these trade agreements, we're mostly talking about the exports, which will definitely benefit the economy as a whole. But if we look at it from an import perspective, what can we look forward to, especially for myself as a consumer? What exactly am I gaining from this agreement? What should I look forward to?
Yeah, so I mean, Africa is quite an interesting continent, in a sense that, for instance, we remain to have one of the fertile lands in the world, and the one that we're already using is also underutilized because of the technical challenges and some technical aspects of things for some countries. So therefore, for the Africa Free Trade Area, I think is going to be a tool, because if you can recall that this agreement is also incorporated to the 2063 agenda, which is a broader agenda for the continent itself. Now, as a consumer, now you will be in a position to, because remember, as much as South Africa trade a lot of products, there are products that even if though it produces, but we do import. For instance, we are buying around 1 million of rice. We're buying a lot of palm oil, and we have countries that produce those products in Africa. You can easily have a good relation in terms of buying maybe some palm oil from Nigeria or rice from Tanzania and so forth. And of course, they're going to be able to import, for instance, our avocado. There are African countries that produce avocado, but you can have that variety. As a consumer, for instance, you want to get some product, from Kenya. Through this, you can be able to get that, because I mean, as much as we have had issues with tariffs and all that, which is part of what this agreement wants to address. So those are kind of issues that they're going to be able to sort of get. I mean, we have countries in Africa that produce the best coffee in the world. South Africa is one of the countries that take a lot of coffee. You have, cocoa that is being produced in Africa. So, meaning we are the biggest, brand in terms of producing cocoa that is needed for one of the most expensive industries, which is chocolate. Those are some of the things that I feel like as consumers, you're going to have that variety or the choice of choosing what you want to get based on the products that are available across the continent and the countries that do export those products.
Oh, well, that's perfect. Thanks. So a few months ago, we saw the first shipment leaving South Africa to Ghana. I think it was exporting minerals or electronics. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. So that was Ghana. So from an agriculture point of view, which markets should we be focusing on?
So for now, as I said earlier on, that South Africa, I mean, Africa as a continent is still a bigger market for South Africa. But now, if you are to look at that at an overall standing, you will realize that South Africa's products are still concentrated in a few countries, particularly those that are within the cross-border kind of a situation, or exactly. So they are very close to us. So now with this agreement, it is going to allow South Africa to also kind of expand, its footprint to the continent. Because remember, part of the issues that South Africa still does not, export to a larger degree, especially for some products like your very basic, foods, like your potatoes that have quite huge tariffs. Very basic foods that you find out we could not, we're not in a position, to sell because of the high tariffs that we have and to other countries. So I think this is going to be something that is going to sort of open up more doors for other countries, for other regions. For instance, if we are to look into Central Africa, go to Cameroon, the countries that are in the West and the East, as much as we do export there, there's still a lot of room for improvement because, as I was saying earlier on, that for now, South African products, they're still very concentrated to close, proximity to it. So therefore, with this trade, it's an opportunity to open a lot of those other doors. And this, of course, is not necessary for South Africa. It is also for other, other countries that are also, part of this deal. So I can say that we are, as a continent, and of course, South Africa as a country that is geared to export, we are looking forward to this, and definitely we're going to have to be benefiting from this based on at least the aspirations and the will. Of course, there has to be a will for other countries to be able to, loosen up a little bit their markets and allow countries to trade, freely and so forth.
Okay, thanks, Thabile, for that. I just want to find out from you. So when we talk about intra-Africa trade, one of the topics that we can't avoid is the infrastructure challenges.
Absolutely.
What's your take on that? Are there any developments that we should look out for to capitalize, make the most out of this agreement?
So from the inception, at least from the beginning of the entire Africa continental free trade area, the infrastructure issue came out, loudly, that should we want to achieve, the aspirations of this agreement, they're going to have to be a serious investment in infrastructure. Look at typical countries that are necessarily like now, because there are countries that have quite small, even tarred roads that allows, for products to even move within those countries. Now, when you bring that to a scale of a continent, then you can imagine how much of an issue infrastructure is going to be. As a result, the SADC, leaders, they had at one point developed a master plan, that is geared to address infrastructure across the region. And that's something that, is very important, is crucial. Remember, if we want to look at that at the scale of a continent, look at what has been happening in South Africa because of the poor performance from our ports, the infrastructure from rails and poor roads. It has been an issue, especially for South Africa, because it produces quite larger number of products that needs to be transported. Now, when you take that to the continent, you can see the scale of the challenge that is going to develop, especially for countries that have not necessarily, invested more on infrastructure. As a result, there are a lot of other initiatives, both by governments across the region, by private sector. They've developed a number of, funds to be able to achieve this. The AU is definitely having some part that is dealing specifically with this. So infrastructure is an issue they cannot run away from, but there are plans that that are put in place, including the master plan that I was talking about, that the SADC leaders have agreed upon, and it is sort of a blueprint that is being used to address the infrastructure issue across the continent, at least the region.
Oh, yes. And then other challenges or risks that we might be exposing ourselves to when trading under this agreement. One that comes into mind is definitely the currency issue. So when you look at it from an currency exchange rate point of view, what challenges are we exposing ourselves to, and how can we actually deal with those?
So basically, there is, that one is without a doubt going to be an issue, because if there's one thing that the continent will need to do, is to standardize a lot of what is going to happen within the continent. For instance, if I may take the EU, almost the systems that are being used there are very similar. So when you have to pay for a product from Greece, we're paying into its neighbors, other countries. So the system is quite friendly, it's easy, because they are using the same system. So that's a kind of approach that the continent will need to develop, that is to harmonize a lot of other systems that are being used. And this includes, issues like your cross-border requirements, that is the papers that you will need. Because for instance, now there are certain countries where when you are going to at least have a product that you're exporting, that it requires paperwork that is different to another country, that develops, challenges to trade, of course. And then the currency, even though it's still dominated by the dollar at this stage, and of course the system that is being used to pay there is quite, skewed to one system. There's still countries that require different kind of currencies and all that. So I think those are things that the leaders and of course the policymakers will need to make sure that they address those, because as much as they appear small, but this agreement is not going to be able to take off should that because, for instance, if you are to look into the countries like now that have begun to trade within the agreement, you can see that those are countries that are quite advanced in terms of their trading trading activities, and that is because those countries have developed, based on the experience that I was talking about, they have developed a mentality of knowing that what needs to be done is the standardized, kind of a situation where products are to be traded. You know what you need when you're going to each country. But of course, as soon as we have one uniform thing, kind of currency, for instance, and then the paperwork and so forth, this is going to open up a lot of very huge opportunities, because now you'll know, as long as you're trading within Africa, you need to have A, B, and C. As long as you have those, and then you are set. Also the issues around the phytosanitary measures, those are related to health. The health-related problems globally are becoming an issue, and consumers, are getting quite aware of some of those dangers. So for some products now, there's going to be those certificates, that are going to be needed to make sure that if I'm buying something from South Africa, I know that this is safe, based, on the products that is being, the way it is produced, and so forth. And of course, as soon as we address those, I think we're going to be crossing, and achieving the goals that the agreement wants, or is it intended for, and of course, going forward to our agenda 2063.
Oh no, that's great. That was a great conversation. Thank you for sharing your insightful advice, Thabile. We really appreciate having you. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Absolutely, so yeah, it was a good experience for me. I wouldn't mind, to one from time guys to join. You are quite doing a wonderful job out there, and I'm glad that you've managed to come across me, and I'm looking forward to some of this in the next future.
No, we'll definitely continue with our series on agriculture exports. And thank you all for tuning in. For more information about Berget and the work that we are doing, please log on to our website, www.berget.co.za. Till next time, thank you.
Goodbye, my guy. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you.